Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And for those who are watching us from a different time zone, good morning or good evening, wherever you may be. And if you're watching us live, please join us in this conversation. This is not only an interview between me and Adam, but we're inviting you to join us today. So, for those who are new in this platform or new to me, I'm Marilyn. I'm the CEO and founder of Customized Training Solutions Private Limited and 3 Experience. And we brand ourselves as Asia's most trusted training and business solutions partner. We're all about connecting people, knowledge, and opportunities for organizational success. And we've been creating meaningful learning experiences, executive communities, strategic conversations, and business connections that drive growth and transformation. So, this session is our first out of the series Executive Reset, leading from a more grounded place. And today's conversation with Adam Rice will be around how high performers break old patterns, mental health, NLP, and leadership. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker and for guest for today, Adam Rice. He is the founder of AJR Counseling and Coaching, a credentialed mental health clinician and an experienced coach dedicated to helping people improve their mental well-being with expertise in neurolinguistic programming or NLP, healthcare, and higher education. He combines practical coaching with evidence-based approach to create lasting change. Adam is passionate about helping individuals build resilience, overcome mental health challenges, and lead healthier, more fulfilling lives. Without so much further ado, I'd like to invite Adam. Hi, Adam.
Hi. That was a really good introduction. Thank you for that.
My pleasure to introduce you. And if you'd like to add anything, please do so before I ask you more questions
No, I
today.
think I think you did quite okay with that. That was better than I would do myself.
Thank you so much. And of course, let's dive into the questions so that our audience will get a lot from this conversation. And again, we're inviting our audience to join us in this conversation. So, our conversation again is on how high performer breaks old patterns, whether it's on mental health, NLP, and leadership. So my first question is that many high performers are seen as the strong one, the one people that everyone can depend on, right? So what's the hidden emotional or mental health cost of always carrying that identity, Adam?
Mm. It's a really good question. And look, I've been here myself, and I think owning a business or being the founder of a business, and in fact, I had 3 businesses. I have 2 now. My daughter
Wow.
took another one, but being the strong one, it can look impressive from the outside, but internally it becomes so exhausting. And from an NLP perspective, it actually becomes an identity pattern.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one that copes. I'm the one who fixes. I'm the one who doesn't fall apart. But the problem is that when strength becomes your identity, vulnerability can start to feel unsafe in a way. Yeah. And the hidden cost of that, I think, is that people can often disconnect and forget their own needs. And that was somewhere where I went. So basically, they stop checking in with themselves. They override stress signals. Uh, they keep performing even when, like, their nervous system is saying, "Hey, I need a rest. I need a rest," and becomes really stressful. And over time, that can actually show up as anxiety or resentment.
Mm-hmm.
It show up as emotional numbness where people just dissociate from that. Definitely burnout, which is a big thing, I think, and that's something that I've experienced in the past, and you don't want to ever go there. Sleep issues is another one, irritability, or feeling like you're functioning but not really living in a way. Now, I guess, clinically, I often see high functioning people who don't realize that they're struggling because they're still achieving something. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that achievement does not always mean that it's keeping yourself well and looking after your well-being. Sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
person is succeeding externally, but
Mm-hmm.
they're slowly losing connection with themselves internally, and that shift is to stop being strong. I guess it's to redefine strength. Real strength is not carrying everything alone, I guess. And that's something that I think we all do. And I don't know whether you've done that, but I've definitely done that. But noticing that real strength actually is knowing when to pause, when to regulate, and even when to ask for support and lead from a grounded place rather than being in that survival mode all the time.
Wow, that's really great explanation, and it really created awareness. And I'm also like very familiar to what you've said. Always being the strong one, and sometimes
Yeah,
you don't really sometimes notice it, so it's all about creating awareness on that space, right? So in
absolutely.
my introduction earlier as well, I noticed that you work in the intersection of the mental health as well as NLP. So from your experience, why do intelligent and successful people still repeat the same emotional patterns of behavior despite knowing better? Like what you've said, being strong is not always impressive in the outside, but it can also lead to burnout or exhaustion, right? As you
Mhm.
explained earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and that's another really, really good question. I think I'd like to think of myself as being quite intelligent. I think a lot of other people, anybody who gets into business themselves, I guess, doesn't really do it for the calmness of it, but we do it because we can see things or see how we can make a bit of change. And
Uh-huh.
what's interesting is that from an NLP perspective, again, I guess one of the prime directives of our unconscious mind is that it follows the least path of resistance. And that means that we will keep doing the same thing over and over again, even if it's not good for us. And
Mm-hmm.
because intelligence don't automatically change unconscious patterns. And when I talk about unconscious patterns, they're patterns that are underneath that we're not actually consciously aware of. So
Mm-hmm.
a person can intellectually know that this isn't good for me, but still repeat the behavior because the nervous system and the unconscious mind are running an older program, which is, believe it or not, more comfortable to be in
Mm-hmm.
because it's familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And many patterns are state dependent. And when someone is calm, they can think clearly. But when stress, fear, rejection, pressure, or conflict activates old emotional states, I guess, that they often default to behavior that once actually protected them. So there was a time where it did keep them safe, and that might be people pleasing, it might be overworking, it might be shutting down, controlling, avoiding conflict, or trying to even prove their worth. And that was something that I especially. That's a whole different story. But this is why successful people can be actually brilliant in business, but struggle emotionally in relationships or even in leadership. And the conscious mind says, I know better, but the unconscious pattern says, nah, let's stay here. This is how we actually stay safe. So the work is actually not about blaming the person or their intelligence for that matter. It's actually helping them understand the pattern and becoming aware of that, interrupting it and installing like a whole new response, I guess. And that's where I bring NLP into a lot of things for me, even for myself, because NLP is powerful because it looks at how thoughts, language, emotion, and behavior are all structured. And that can help the person create a new internal strategy to deal with those patterns and stress.
Wow, that's very interesting, because a lot of times, like when we work a lot and we don't realize that we're already close to a burnout, then we we tend to have, like, I mean, the decisions that we make are like not at par as when we have, as you mentioned, in a calm way where we can think clearly, and again, as you mentioned, that's where most successful people struggle, right? Whether
Mm,
it's emotional, whether it's in personal or
yeah,
in professional context, right? So that's
absolutely.
great. And I appreciate you also sharing how powerful NLP is, right? Because
Mm,
it really covers not only what you think and what you do, but it's like the whole ecosystem, from your thoughts, language, emotions, behavior are
absolutely.
actually strategically covered in order to avoid any stress or any patterns. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate that.
Well, there's
And most
actually,
people don't know that, right?
yeah. Well, look, there is a saying, and it's really true. Well, there's sayings that I really like to think about a lot for myself, and because NLP or knowing that these patterns are unconscious, they're not consciously
Mhm,
there. I mean, not something
mhm.
you're thinking about. But Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, you'll go through life and call it
True.
fate. And the other one I really love is that your unconscious mind is a wonderful servant,
Uh-huh.
but a terrible master. And once you know how your unconscious mind works, you can work with it. You'll know where to go with it. Mm.
That's great. Making the unconscious conscious, right? I
Mm.
really love that part, and I wish more people can do that as well. So
Yeah.
for leaders who have actually gone through emotionally manipulative or narcissistic relationship, which you specialize in, right? Whether again we talk about whether it's personal or professional relationship, how does that experiences quietly shows up in leadership, decision making, or even trust?
Mm. Well, to start off with that, I think the first thing to say is that I think the term narcissistic or narcissism or narcissist is somehow sometimes a loosely used term, right? So it gets overused a lot, and there is specific disorders when it comes to narcissistic personality disorders, and sometimes we do see that in people who are high achievers as well, right? And but that might be healthy narcissism, right? So in what I mean is that we have to believe that we're good at something, so we go and do what we do, right? But look, it often shows up subtly. A leader may become highly capable on the outside, but internally start second guessing themselves. And
Mhm.
for emotional manipulation or narcissistic dynamics, a person can lose trust in even their own perception. And they may ask, like, am I overreacting? Did I get that wrong? Can I trust what I'm sensing? And in leadership, can actually show up as difficult in making decisions or over explaining or avoiding conflict, tolerating poor behavior for too long, or becoming hypervigilant around people's moods and being really aware of that. I mean,
Mhm.
some leaders that I've worked with become overly controlling because uncertainty no longer feels safe either. And others can become too accommodating because they've learned that keeping the peace actually protects them as well. And if I put an NLP lens on this, and the person who may have developed associations between conflict and anger,
Mhm.
or boundaries and guilt, or confidence and punishment. So even when they're in healthier environment, their system may still respond as if they're back in that old dynamic again.
Mhm.
So I think rebuilding leadership after that experience is really about rebuilding the identity and that self-trust. There was a time that we can make decisions and it wasn't questioned. And, it's actually helping the person come back to their own values,
Mhm.
their own internal authority, and the ability to trust what they notice, I guess. And so when a leader trusts themselves again, they often stop leading from fear and they start leading from alignment because you're more congruent with those values.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting. And again, we've seen that a lot with leaders, right? Like it takes them time to make decisions. They avoid conflict, or
Mm.
they they are like micromanaging, I guess. Like you've mentioned, hyper vigilant around people's mood, and there's a factor of trust and all those stuff. And again, leadership is about building relationship and trust after
Absolutely.
all, right? So that's very interesting concept. So when you actually manage to create awareness around this space, then the more you can trust people and build better relationships as well, right? So it's just right right to
Just
to have awareness around this space,
yeah.
right? So
I think
thank you. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think anybody in business, it's
Mm-hmm.
and me too. It was actually really difficult for me to delegate to people, and that's a long time for me to learn to take some of that off and
Mm-hmm.
be a little bit more relaxed and be okay with okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get this done today. So it's interesting. It's a journey, that's for sure.
Exactly, exactly. Because as we were actually talking earlier before we started, right? Like it's always a journey. I mean, sometimes we don't get it until we actually experience, right? Like,
Yeah,
what's the difference between this one, right? Like, you can't really fully experience happiness without experiencing sadness, right? So,
absolutely. Absolutely. It's the same as courage. You have to have vulnerability. It's, you have to be vulnerable to have courage. It's like a battery. It doesn't work if there's two positive, two negative ends. It's got to have one each. Yeah.
exactly. And before I ask the next question again, we would like to invite those who are joining us live today. Feel free to share with us your takeaways or if you have any questions. And I appreciate John Paul for the love. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And again, going back to my next question. So people often focus on mindset, but you also talk about nervous system regulation with NLP, the subconscious, and all those stuff. So why does self-regulation become even more important as our responsibility and leadership influence grow?
Mm, yeah. Look, I think the higher you go in responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
more your internal state impacts other people. And a leader's nervous system does not stay private. It enters the room. And if a leader is dysregulated or reactive or anxious, overwhelmed, that energy actually does spread through the room, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think everybody's seen that happen. And, in an NLP perspective, that state actually affects behavior. So the state you're in determines how you communicate, how you listen, how how you might interpret problems,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or how you make decisions, and also how much flexibility you have, right? And when you're regulated, you actually have more choice. But when you're dysregulated,
Mm-hmm.
you often default to those old patterns that I was talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
Regulation is not just about calming down, it's actually
Mm-hmm.
about creating enough internal space to respond rather than react. And look, it allows leaders to stay clear under pressure and actually cleaner decisions. Uh, it helps them to hold boundaries even better,
Mm-hmm.
and do that without any type of aggression, I guess, and communicate with presence instead of urgency. And I think that's a really important thing, being present instead of having that urgency. This is one of the. This exact thing is one of the reasons that we actually built the Thrive Beyond Limits retreat in Bali, because
Mm-hmm.
and designed for CEOs and founders and seniors carrying a lot of need or to get their nervous system regulation and to regulate with that and have some grounded confidence. Because one of the interesting things is when I feel overwhelmed with something, I'll actually step out for a bit. And sometimes that might be going for a walk in between clients for an hour,
Mm-hmm.
might be going for a 2-day holiday somewhere just to have a bit of time out. And often I find when I do that, I'm able to regulate a lot more. It gives my nervous system a rest, but I can come back and I'm much more creative. And, because I think at that level, when you're in a leadership position, performance isn't just about the strategy. It's got to be about the
Mm-hmm.
as well. Yeah.
True. I love that. I love that. And that's, when you're high performing or you run your own business, sometimes it's like you have that tendency to just like push, push, push all the time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And again, if you're a leader, as you've mentioned, that always shows up with your decisions, with
Mhm.
how you respond to the people that you actually work with. And it's very interesting as well that you reminded us of the importance of reset or
Mm.
taking a rest, which I've also realized. I mentioned to you that I just recently went to Kuala Lumpur, right?
Mm.
And I'm really glad that towards the end of my trip, I decided not to, like, push myself to get more appointments on the last day,
Yeah.
um, and rather just enjoy the last day, my last morning in KL by riding a horse with my friend, and really
Mm.
just connecting and relaxing, right?
Yeah.
Instead of pushing myself more after
Yeah.
40 meetings and two like group networking and a two whole training over
Yeah.
the weekend.
Yeah.
So, oh, we have a question here
Mhm.
from Upar. Thank you, Upar, for your question. What would be your advice for people pleasing behavior? I have people pleasing behavior. You mentioned this earlier, Adam, right? About people pleasing behavior to accommodating, mainly to avoid conflicts due to high stress of my job in a narcissistic environment where most things are out of my control. Tolerating rude narcissistic comments, feeling energy sucked up after a meeting. So how
Mm.
do you deal with such situations?
Mm. Look, it's probably a bit of a complex question to answer here, but and maybe if you wanted to email me personally about that, and I could go through something with you with it. But in a lot of ways, when it comes to narcissistic abuse, it's the anxiety side of it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
with the anxiety side of things, anxiety makes you do a couple of things, right? Well, it does a few. One, it's a really important emotion for us to have because it's our protection response. So we need to have it. Normally, if you are feeling the actual anxiety, normally it doesn't mean that you need protection from something. But when you've been in that narcissistic abuse, you actually become highly alert to that anxiety, and it's there. You're in protection response a lot of the time, right? So when that anxiety happens, we either flight, which is we try and get away from the situation, or we avoid it. We either fight as well, which means that we'll try and get through it if we can't fly. We'll also freeze, and freeze is another part of that. But what people pleasing is actually fawning, and what fawning means is that you are looking at protecting or making things in a way or doing things for people so you're keeping the peace so nothing bad happens. So it can be exhausting. It can be absolutely exhausting. But uh, that's one of the things that's actually there to tell you how to handle that. Probably need to go a little bit deeper with that, and because there's so many elements there, and I do specialize in narcissism now, and that's because I've been there, right? So I get all this. So uh, but there's so many different answers, but there's also lots of different things that can happen, right, in that sort of relationship. Mm.
Thank you for answering that. And I hope you're satisfied with that. But again, as for the invitation of Adam to please share with us your question, and he'll be glad to answer that through email. And I have a comment here from John Paul. So a lot of people seems to be doing well on the outside, but are struggling privately. And this is the answer that you made mention earlier, Adam, right? So what's one piece of advice you'd give someone trying to balance success with their own well-being?
Mm. Well, one is look after yourself. There's a saying, especially in personal relationships, I hear this, or romantic relationships. But I think it is just as much important as in a relationship in business or career, because there always has to be a me before there can be a we. Yeah. And the thing is that if you're not there, there's no business, right? Or if you're not there for yourself and you're not confident in yourself, well, then that's something that you can work on, because that's going to help you in the future and become the person that you want to be. I think there's a lot of unconscious patterns that are there. And for anybody, I think we've all been in them. One of them is imposter syndrome. So the fear somebody's going to find out you're not as good as what somebody else thinks you are. But there's also not good enough, the fear of failure, even the fear of success. Some people will even sabotage success so they don't fail. Yeah. So there's perfectionism as well. I'm just thinking about all the patterns that I can think of right now, because there is a lot. Yeah. Fear of abandonment or rejection. That's a huge one, right? And that's when that people pleasing might come in, because they don't want to be rejected or abandoned in some way. But if we look at the 3 A's, which is in NLP, I use them a lot, is the awareness, the acceptance, and the action. And the thing is that if you're aware of something that you're not quite happy with, and you accept that, well, then you'll be able to action it. You can't action something that you haven't accepted, and you can't accept something that you're not aware of. And there's a beautiful one of my favorite NLP presuppositions, actually, I use myself, is it's the law of requisite variety. So the person with the most flexibility will control the situation of the system. And that doesn't mean that you go out of your way and do things for people. It's actually about how you manage yourself. And if you're aware of something there that you want to change, well then, and you can accept that, well then you can go out and action that and do something about it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. I really love how you made it as practical as possible for us. Again, the triple A that you've mentioned is awareness, acceptance, and action. And I hope, John Paul, that really helps you. And this is just to share thank you from you, Par, from an earlier's question. And we really appreciate your questions. So even if we're done with the conversation, feel free to keep those questions coming. I'm sure Adam wouldn't mind answering all those questions. But for the purpose of time, I'd say I'll go to the last question. So, if a leader watching today realizes they are stuck in an old loop, which I guess the two questions from our audience is all about, right? So perhaps stress, self doubt, overworking, or people pleasing. What one small shift they can start making today to reveal self trust?
Yeah. Look, the first shift, I think, because only one small shift is to really just pause. And like I just spoke about the 3 A's, right? That awareness, the acceptance, and the action. But being aware is the most important one out of that to start with, right? Because a lot of the time when we're in an unconscious pattern, we're not actually consciously aware of it. So when we become consciously aware of it, then we can start to make movement on doing something about it, okay? So, I mean, one small shift is to just pause and ask, what am I responding to? The present moment or the pattern that's there? And one of the things that I get some of my clients to do is actually become aware as their first ever bit of homework. Become aware of when you're starting to feel something, because like we have a thought, right, which releases a chemical, which creates a feeling, and that generates a behavior. So as soon as you, sometimes we might not even be conscious of the thoughts that are coming in because we're so used to them, but our feeling starts to come, and that's how we'll manage. And say I've had somebody who gets really angry about something, I said, well, when you feel that anger coming up, that's the time to stop and pause. What is it you're actually responding to? Because that gives you the awareness, but you're learning about yourself, and it's actually the beginning of being able to stop that from happening. I guess at one question, like, what am I responding to? It helps a person to step out of that automatic reaction. Sorry, I'm getting a bit dry. and into awareness. And in NLP, we often say, like I've been saying, gives you the choice. And without awareness, the patterns run you. But with awareness, you can actually start to interrupt it. And that's the thing. As I said before, we'll keep doing the same thing over and over again, even if it's not good for us, because that's what we're used to. But it's about making that change. And when we do make that change, we actually start to feel uncomfortable. And one of the things that I often say to myself and my clients is that it's okay to be uncomfortable. It just means that change is happening. But more repetition this will be the new behavior, right? So look, I think one of the things I would suggest, and just as a bit of a practical thing, but make one small promise to yourself daily and keep it. And it might be taking a proper lunch break. It might be saying no to one unnecessary demand, or finishing work at a set time, or taking 5 minutes to even regulate before responding to a difficult message. Because that will actually bring that awareness of where you need to work. And that self-trust is actually rebuilt through that evidence. And every time you keep a promise to yourself, your unconscious mind starts to learn, I can rely on me again. And that's actually quite powerful if you think about it, especially for leaders who have spent years abandoning themselves to keep everything and everyone else going. So the goal is not to transform anything overnight, but the goal is to create one interruption in that old loop and one piece of evidence that you're now leading yourself in a different direction.
Wow, that's really great. Thank you so much for that very practical and simple tip. And again, it's interesting that how simple is that, right? Pause and ask. But I'd say also that it's it's easier said than done, right? But again, it starts with awareness, and I really appreciate that, because I've had a lot of conversation around this space on creating awareness, because everything starts with it, right? Like how you can stop the loop, that we are speaking about, the patterns that doesn't that doesn't help you or serve you anymore, right? So I really appreciate this conversation, and thank you so much for all the practical insights that you have shared with us today. And at this point, I guess I would like to also leave our audience with like a question that they might want to think about. At what point does being resilient stop being strength and start being self-neglect, right? Because that's generally the theme that we have been talking about, right? In the last 30 minutes. And before we end, I'd like to invite you to share, Adam, about the upcoming retreat in Bali that you and Jovan are organizing. Maybe please invite our audience about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a passion of mine and Jovan, and because we've been there, I think, with that burnout, and we really want to take what we know and what we learned from ourselves and us being us, and handing that out to some other people who are leaders. And so we created the Thrive Beyond Limits, the executive balance, and it's a performance retreat. So it's in Bali, it's in September. It's a 7-day retreat for CEOs or founders, entrepreneurs, leaders who want to perform at a high level without burning out. And we're combining a bit of NLP, a bit of nervous system regulation, some communication frameworks, mobility, and some muscle or myofascial kind of practice, and a 90-day integration plan so leaders can leave with the practical tools that they actually use, and when they can actually use when they return home, is what I meant. So yeah, I'm so looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great 7 days. And I even me presenting it gives me a step out of what I do here a lot of the time. So I'm really looking forward to stepping into that different space and sharing that knowledge.
Wow, thank you so much. And I also look forward to be able to experience that retreat myself. And thank you so much for sharing that with us and all the practical insights you've shared with us. And to our audience, I'm looking forward to having you again. We're gonna have another discussion this coming Tuesday at the same time, when success stops feeling like you. Reinvention and congruent change, this time with Jovan. And again, thank you so much, Adam, for your time and for your insights. And I look forward to working more with you. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone, for joining us. Bye for
Thanks for
now.
having me. Bye.